Hey, Hawkeye fans, Chad Leistikow of the Des Moines Register. Three-man weave here today. Big news, emergency podcast on this Monday morning. I guess we're live from Norman, right? We got Dargan Southard with me. He's down here to cover the Iowa women's team with me. He's on here for a reason to start. I'll touch on that in a moment. Tyler Tachman, our men's basketball beat reporter, also joining us here and obviously reacting this morning to the news that Ben McCollum will be the next Iowa men's basketball coach. He succeeds Fran McCaffrey, the winningest coach in Hawkeye history. And let's start with you, Tyler. Good job getting that story up early. We confirmed it pretty quickly this morning. Looked like it was going this way for a while, but your initial thoughts on the Ben McCollum hire?
I'll just give a quick overview about him for those who aren't familiar. So he spent 15 seasons at Northwest Missouri State, Division II. Very, very successful there. Won 4 Division II national titles and in a 6-year stretch nonetheless. And that becomes even more impressive when you take into account that one of those years the tournament was canceled due to COVID-19. So there was a stretch where he won 4 national D2 national titles in a stretch of 5 tournaments. So that's obviously really impressive. Then takes the job at Drake in 2024. That was his first season coaching at the Division I level, and takes them, 31-4 overall record. They go to the round of 32 in the NCAA tournament and get a chance to kind of showcase his coaching skills on the national stage in the NCAA tournament. So he's turning 44 in April, and he was born in Iowa City, raised in Storm Lake, so he has Iowa ties. So that's kind of just brief overview about him for those who aren't familiar. And on paper, and we can get into this in more detail, but on paper a really good hire and one that I think should inspire some excitement and optimism going forward around the men's basketball program.
Yeah, all told, it ends up being a 9.5 day search, more like 9, assuming that most things were kind of buttoned up late last night. That's my guess since it broke so early this morning, or my informed guess, which is kind of funny. So I've been down here with Dargan here. We're going to let him go in a minute here. We're going to preview the women's game a little bit later in the show, so stick with us if you're full-fledged Hawkeye basketball fan ready for the Iowa-Oklahoma women's game. So Dargan's going to jump on later, but wanted to bring him on right away because he's been kind of chuckling with me in the car each day because he knows that I'm kind of got my feet in both worlds here with the men and the women on this search. And as a Tennessee alum, somebody who has covered many coaches and searches himself, it was kind of funny to hear him say, I guess, identify that Iowa fans just aren't used to this, right, Dargan?
So again, I don't consider myself a veteran of much, but I do consider myself a veteran of coaching searches. So for just a little snippet, so in the 6 years from my junior year of high school to my senior year of college, Tennessee had 3 different men's basketball coaches and 3 different football coaches. So that's like 6 searches, 5 searches in a very short window. And I mean, when you zoom out of the emotion of being in, your first major coaching search, probably since Fran and, 15 years ago, this did not scratch the surface of dramatic at all. I mean, if you look at it, Iowa missed, I guess you could say, on one guy, and how much Iowa really had a shot there, who knows. But then, so you got your number 2 dude who was right down the road, and I think everybody can feel like that's a pretty solid get. I think that the overall reaction from the fan base is very positive to this. So just be happy that, I mean, I think Beth Goetz deserves credit for streamlining this as much as she did, because I've seen it. And that doesn't even count the Tennessee coaching search that got the most headlines, which was the 2017 one that ended up with Jeremy Pruitt and AD fired. So, yes, this one, all told, went pretty well for Iowa, I think.
Well, yeah, and it just goes to show also that I mean, these are major hires, like that you just said. An AD gets hired if he makes or she makes the wrong choice or botches something, and it feels like overall that Beth Goetz deserves a lot of credit here for getting the deal done. It doesn't mean it was perfect, but I think a positive overall. Dargan, we'll let you go for now, but good little contribution there. He's going to produce our show, but he'll be back on, I don't know, probably a half hour or so, and we'll talk about the women. Tyler, here's my initial reaction. I think it's just reading the fan base, knowing kind of the feel of how the emotions went over the last 9-10 days. I mean, obviously this was stressful for fans, for us, I'm sure for the administration. I feel like it's an A hire. I mean, I think there's a sentiment, I think, among Iowa fans now, and I agree with them, that maybe they got the better guy after all. Yeah, as you know, I was more inclined to make DeVries the priority just initially, and but we were both right there with it. 1A, 1B. Those were the two guys, and I know you were kind of more of the camp of you preferred McCollum over DeVries from the beginning. So I think overall, I feel like this is a really informed hire, almost a perfect hire in some ways, because you're getting a guy that isn't going to come in with just major expectations, but also kind of has that blue collar work ethic, knows how to win games with lesser talent, that type of thing. So it's like I don't mean a perfect hire in like that's the best coach you could possibly get in the country, but like as far as like culture fit, as far as what Iowa needs right in this moment, I think that Ben McCollum, from everything I've seen, is right there for me with Darren DeVries.
We talked about this a little bit kind of during the process, that Ben McCollum's resume reminded me a lot of Curt Cignetti, who was hired as Indiana's head football coach. And that's not an apples to apples comparison, because obviously it's two different sports, but it's similar in the sense that Cignetti was just a winner, as he moved his way up the coaching ranks, and Indiana was his first power conference job. And we saw how that turned out. And I think, is that fair to put expectations like that on Ben McCollum? No, I'm not saying that I was going to go to the Sweet 16 or Elite 8 in the first year or whatever, but it shows that hiring the profile of a guy who has been successful at the lower levels, hasn't been at a power conference job, can come and be successful in that role. And Ben McCollum is similar in that sense. That's basically right now the one major hole in his resume, is that he's never coached at the power conference level. He showed that winning at the Division II level can translate to mid-major. He did that in a really small sample size at Drake, but there tend to be more hoops when you make the jump now to the power conference level, more money involved, more competition. We heard Fran McCaffrey talk a lot about just the Big Ten Conference and how every team has good players and every team has good coaches. And I think some of that is just kind of the cliche, but some of that is true, is that the Big Ten is one of the best basketball conferences in the country. So there's just going to naturally be more challenges at this level for Ben McCollum to face. But what I saw, at least watching Drake play against Missouri and Drake play against Texas Tech, is how noticeably well coached they were. Like it was so obvious watching those games how well thought out, how well put together the game plan was, how well coached those guys were. And that's remarkable, because this is already the highest level of college basketball. And to see that type of discrepancy between where Drake was and where Missouri was, the talent gap was just remarkable. Like the talent gap was not even close, but Drake just was so much more calculated, they just look like so much more of a cohesive unit. And that's a credit to Ben McCollum. And it was hard to watch them and not see how well coached they were. And I think that's part of what Drake was able to show on the national stage. Like they were able to get that in front of people, because I don't know how many people really watched, if you're not a Drake fan, like how many people watch Drake games over the course of the season, but to see that on on the big stage during March, that was really, for me at least, it was eye-opening.
No question. Yeah, and even in both of the NCAA tournament games. I mean, that was most people's first glimpse of Ben McCollum. And I think we all knew he was going to be the next Iowa coach when he got that technical foul, right, in the second half against Texas Tech. No, no, yeah, that's kind of his reputation, and that's why you make the Sir Kurt Signetti comp in my column. Hopefully, you guys check it out at hawkcentral.com. We made it free for you, so you could read it. I see a lot of Kirk Ferentz vibes in Ben McCollum, just because Ferentz relies on ball control, fundamentals, good coaching, and kind of winning with less, and defense. I mean, you look at Ben McCollum is known as kind of a mastermind of how to play defense and also point guard play. That was another thing that's come up. I mean, you look at Bennett Sturtz, and just think about that. That's probably the one thing Kirk Ferentz hasn't mastered is like the quarterback part, right? For the most part. But if you can in football have a quarterback and a good defense, that makes sense, right? And so I feel like that's kind of his framework in how he builds a basketball team. Builds it around the point guard. Bennett Sturtz obviously was his guy at Drake and Northwest Missouri State, and has 1 year of eligibility remaining. So you can put the dots together there, and you'd have to believe that that just makes sense. We don't know that he's coming for sure, but that seems to be almost like a Tucker DeVries with Darren DeVries. This almost seems like that type of thing where it's a 1 year guy that probably will come with him. Don't have reporting on that, but it just seems like it's a natural. I mean, it just seems like that would make sense. I don't think he's going to stay at Drake. Who knows? Maybe he'll go into the portal and get the highest offer out there. I'm sure he could get a high offer. But anyway, those were the vibes of Ferentz, and it also goes back to, and this is before your time, Tyler, but when they hired Kirk Ferentz, he wasn't the first choice. And I'm not saying that Ben McCollum wasn't Beth Goetz's first choice, but Bob Stoops was the guy that all the fans wanted. Darren DeVries was the guy that all the fans wanted from the start. Not all, but many. And McCollum, Ferentz ended up being a great consolation prize. Yes, Stoops might have been equally good at Iowa, maybe better at Iowa. He won a national championship at Oklahoma, right here down the street where I am. But Ferentz, over time, built a program that had kind of receded from its all-time winningest coach, and that's a very striking parallel for me.
And here's the thing about this hire, and this wasn't the reason to make the hire, but I think it's something important to point out, is that you can just feel, and I know social media isn't always the best gauge of how people are feeling, but I feel like it's sort of telling in that sense. But you can just feel the excitement level building. This is a hire that people can get excited about, and that can re-energize the program from day one, because that was the problem towards the end of the Fran McCaffrey era, where it felt stale. It felt like it was sort of headed towards a dead end. The crowds at Carver were far too often. It wasn't even close to being full. And it just felt like the energy level surrounding the program wasn't even close to what it should be. It feels like Ben McCollum from day one, because of what he was able to do at Drake, because of he's already been, and this isn't to throw too much shade at Darren DeVries, but he's already been further in the NCAA tournament than Darren DeVries, and Ben McCollum's only coached in Division I for one season. But this is a hire that it feels like people can get excited about and can fill Carver Hawkeye arena around. And that was part of just, you felt like with the program, they needed that kind of jolt of energy. And I feel like Ben McCollum from day one can provide that. And the other thing I want to mention too is that, on paper, this looks like a really good hire, but this isn't an exact science. I would just caution people, because, you look at
kind of like recruiting, right? You think you got a good guy. You think you got a good transfer portal quarterback.
Yeah.
It doesn't always work out.
Yeah, I mean, you look at Archie Miller, who Indiana hired, hotshot guy from Dayton, was really successful there. Doesn't make the tournament in 4 seasons at Indiana. It turns out to be just a flop for the Hoosiers. And Scott, well, I mean, he was, but
I love when you badmouth the Hoosiers. Just
I'm not saying anything that any other Indiana fan.
I know. It's just funny to hear you say. Well,
And so I'll throw out another example there, like Scott Frost. Like everyone thought that was going to be a great hire for Nebraska football, didn't end up even close to what people had hoped. So it's like I just throw that out as a caution now because it's our job to kind of analyze the hire as it is. And on paper, this looks like it could be a really good hire. And I honestly think that it is a really good hire, but that doesn't mean that it's going to work out because one, Iowa's not an easy place to win at. There's going to be plenty of places with more resources, more tradition, more history.
Isn't that the allure of the McCollum hiring, though?
Yeah, no, and I think
that he can do it with less,
right,
competitive with less. And Fran McCaffrey was too, to his credit.
Yeah.
But this gets people excited. Go
yeah,
ahead.
And I think the word you throw out that's really relevant is the word fit. Like it just feels like Ben McCollum is a great fit for Iowa on a bunch of levels. The fact that he's from Iowa, the fact that he has kind of worked his way up. He's a winner. That's what you need. Like full stop. You need to be able to win as a head coach. You need to do a lot of things as a head coach. You need to be a GM. You need to be a fundraiser. You need to be able to interact with fans. But you need to be able to coach and you need to be able to win. Nothing else matters that much if you can't win. And Iowa got a winner in Ben McCollum.
So I told you guys on some of these recent pods, I'm going to try to do a better job of reading the YouTube comments because normally I just get locked in here with Tyler. We have our 3-word headlines and I don't do a good job of that. So reading our YouTube comments, people are very enthusiastic about this hire. Also, a lot of people saying that you're making some really good insights, Tyler. So nice job by you.
A surprise, good insight.
Shocking day all around. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, it is.
Michael Burnett says, wanted him all along. Brian Edgington, I believe this was the right hire. How about this from Hawkeyes 2133? Who do you think the Hawkeyes have a chance of bringing back? And then he says, then the coaching staff. Who comes back? I think Matt Gatens is an interesting thought. I don't know if he has a connection to Ben McCollum. Obviously, he has a connection to Drake and Iowa City and the program, and he's been the guy trying to hold things together back in Iowa City. Josh Sash, a guy on his staff, Tyler Sash's brother, Tommy Birch did a great piece on Josh, actually, last week, how he coaches kind of for Tyler Sash. And I mean, there's an obvious connection there. If Ben McCollum brings him to Iowa City, that would seem like a real sensible thing. He brought him from Northwest Missouri State, would think he would bring him to Iowa City too. And that's another thing, another little Hawkeye. You got to connect with Iowa fans. And I feel like that's a type of thing. I'm not saying anything is a done deal, but if he had a staff with Josh Sash on it and Matt Gatens, I feel like, man, that's a really good starting point for building a staff. What are your thoughts on staff and I think more importantly, obviously, players?
Yeah, I think there's a few that you could possibly retain, and the most obvious being Matt Gatens. I know that he wants to stay. He's inclined to stay at Iowa because of the ties there. I don't think he has a really extensive relationship with Ben McCollum, but another one who it seems kind of up in the air is Tristan Spurlock. He was really important in getting Joshua Lewis, who was one of the top high school prospects to ever commit to the program, has since decommitted, but Spurlock is one who, it's possible Iowa could retain. I think it would be smart for them to retain him because I think he's a really...
If you retain Spurlock, you think you can keep Lewis?
I think there's a chance. Yeah. And then Kyle Denning's another one, director of basketball operations, worked for a while under Fran, has Iowa ties. He's one that I think would probably want to stay around at Iowa if he can, but of course that is going to kind of be dependent on Ben McCollum, the decisions that he makes, and who he wants to take from Drake with him to Iowa. And then as far as players, there's been 3 players who have publicly come out and said that they have left the door open to returning to Iowa, and that's Cooper Koch, Laji Dembele, and Price Sanford. And Price Sanford is probably one of the top priorities in terms of trying to retain, just because the leap he made from freshman to sophomore year, it was very similar to what Peyton Sanford did from freshman to sophomore year. And you feel like he can really be a foundational piece for the program moving forward. But one that you probably feel a little less likely you were able to retain, but I think you take a swing at it regardless, is Josh Dix, because, how could Iowa actually keep him with some of the offers and some of the brands that'll probably be on the table? I think it'll be an uphill battle, but you have to at least try, because he would be one of the better best guards in the Big Ten returning if he would stay at Iowa. And he's obviously
Yeah,
just been
absolutely.
a huge part of what Iowa did last season. So I think you make him a priority and you at least try to keep him. Outside of that, I mean, I don't know,
Seydou Traore is the one guy that's not in the portal, right?
he is not in the portal. Isaiah Johnson Arrigu isn't either, who transferred from Miami midseason. And and Chris Tajo is another one that isn't. But the other thing about the roster building is that Iowa has not had to build a roster in this way because they've had the same head coach. So you haven't had to really deal with this chaotic situation of trying to put together a roster. Fran McCaffrey is pretty relying on building through the high school ranks and then plugging and playing in the portal if he needed to do so. But there hasn't been this situation where you're kind of trying to just put together a roster left and right, being more reliant on the portal. The good news, so that'll be different for Iowa as a program. The good news, though, is that Ben McCollum did this just a year ago at Drake. When he took over there. Most of their roster wasn't at Drake, the previous season that it was went on the team that went to the round of 32. So he took some guys at Northwest Missouri State with him. He brought some guys from Wyoming, Indiana State. So Ben McCollum. So as a program, Iowa isn't used to this, but Ben McCollum in recent history has dealt with this.
Yeah, I think I think Josh Dix would like to stay closer to home. But yeah, that's he's going to be commanding. What I heard was about $1.5 million. So I don't know if Iowa can pay that. What I had sent out to the text group, I think it was yesterday morning, maybe, that Iowa was comfortable promising something in the $4.5 million range between rev share and NIL. That's still going to be in the low end of the Big Ten and a little lower than some of its peers, but it's not bad money. So if you can, maybe there's more excitement about McCollum, maybe more, as he's building a roster, maybe, Beth Goetz, everyone else is able to raise more funds, whatever, for basketball. That's a work in progress, and those numbers are never finalized. It's a moving target, is what I should say. So, I would say pie in the sky, Dix, but if you can keep Sanford and Koch, and which I think is very reasonable. I don't know. I mean, I had one person close to the situation told me, Sanford would love to play for McCollum. One said he's probably gone either way. So I just don't know. I don't know on that front. I think it just depends on what kind of sales pitch, what kind of offer that those guys can get. That's to be determined. It's early. It's very early in that process. So we don't have the answers there on that. But I think Iowa is, if it does have 4.5 million, let's say, again, it's going to be lower than most of its peers. Maybe it gets higher. It's still competitive enough to me, Tyler, to get a couple guys, pay a couple guys. And it'll be interesting to see what McCollum wants to do in terms of like paying a roster, do you pay 2 or 3 guys? Like in his system, I think he's got to get that point guard. So, and I would have to think that it's Bennett Sturtz. I would think Bennett Sturtz would be the perfect fit for that 1 year. And then you figure it out from there, right?
Yeah, so the question I want to ask Ben McCollum, when we eventually have the press conference, introductory press conference with him is, so when you're sitting down with, a recruit, whether that be high school transfer portal, like what are you telling them as to why they should come play for you at Iowa? I'm curious to see his answer. And if I'm just taking a guess, if I'm putting myself in his shoes, one would be that Ben McCollum wins. He's done that everywhere he's been. And the other being is, and this is just based on, I've, watched some press conferences with him during the NCAA tournament, just getting a little bit of feel for who he is. He seems like he has the type of personality that players want to play for. He seems like a guy that, is grounded, doesn't have too much of an ego. And this is, in my limited knowledge of him, that's just the first impression I get from him, because you're going to have to, Iowa isn't going to be the most appealing place to come, but you're going to have to make it a place that is that has a little bit more shine to it. And the thing is that if Ben McCollum can get momentum going, then the doors will start opening, because if fans, donors see winning happening, then that's where you get people more invested. If Iowa wins, it's going to be so much more easy for people to be invested financially, for people to. I tried to mute my notifications, and
That's why you wear headphones, and then it doesn't come up.
I don't know what my computer's doing. I tried to mute, so I apologize for everyone at home.
Okay,
But
it's kind of funny because
I
I get the
try to.
same messages too usually.
Yeah. But look, if you win, the doors will open. And so that's my point, is that once you get this going off the ground, it'll be easier it's the same thing with Indiana football, where Kurt Signetti wins year one and now everyone's invested in Indiana football.
Sure.
You start winning and things will follow, but it's going to, his first 2 seasons at Northwest Missouri State, first 2 seasons as a head coach were not good. They were both losing seasons. And then he picked it up obviously from there. But it's an interesting dynamic, because first 2 seasons at Northwest Missouri State, he lost. First season at Drake, he was wildly successful. I'm interested to see year 1 at Iowa. What does that level of success or lack of success look like?
So also just looking at Drake's current roster and some of their top contributors. I mean, beyond Sturtz, you got Tavian Banks, which is funny. Predates you, Tyler, but he was a star running back for the Hawkeyes way back when. Is a junior at Drake, and we saw him, coming off the bench for Drake. Has 1 year to go. Cam Manayu, apologize if I'm saying that right. He's only a sophomore. He's from Kansas City, 6'8", 230. You'd have to think that those types of guys would be, he started all 35 games for Drake. Those types of guys, would be viable at this point. We don't know for sure. But those are a couple of their top players that maybe could come along with. So it'll be interesting. The roster is going to be one of the bigger stories to unfold here. But I think overall, Tyler, in general, there's just a lot of exciting pieces about this hire to start covering, to start writing about, to get excited about. Let's be honest. There just wasn't much that was getting people excited late in the Fran McCaffrey era. And again, that's not an indictment on him completely at all as a coach. It's just like, that's the reality. And now there's a fresh injection of excitement into the program. You can see it in our YouTube comments. People are excited about it. Anyway, so any other final thoughts before we move on to, I don't know, what other topics do you want to bring up here, Tyler? Because I feel like we've hit the big ones.
Yeah, no, we've mentioned Kirk Ferentz, Kurt Signetti. The other one that this kind of reminds
Stoops, we've mentioned a lot. Tavian Banks,
Archie Miller, Scott Frost.
So let's talk about the process a little bit, okay? Because this thing was not done until at least it was not done as of late yesterday. Okay, so from what I had heard after the fact, that there was never like a meeting between DeVries and Beth Goetz. Now maybe she'll clarify how far that went at some point, but I don't think it got super far. I think that Indiana, this. You follow Indiana. I don't think that got as far as people wanted to believe that it got.
Well, the thing is, Iowa was never going to compete with Indiana resource-wise.
Exactly.
Like,
once Indiana got involved, it was like, okay. Well.
Like, the only chance that Iowa had is that if Darren DeVries was like, I want to come back home to Iowa so badly, and I'm going to basically choose that over anything. That's the only chance that Iowa would have had. But that's a battle that Iowa was never going to win in the first place. So, but I think, but I didn't really see Darren DeVries as a head and shoulders candidate above Ben McCollum. And I put it this way too, is that I feel like Ben McCollum is a little bit more high risk, high reward than Darren DeVries. Like, Darren DeVries has coached at the Division I level for longer. He's at least coached 1 season at the Power Conference level. The floor is probably higher than Ben McCollum, but the ceiling is also probably lower. Ben McCollum, where we still don't know. Can he translate this to the power conference level and win in this type of landscape? That's the major question. But if he is able to translate the level of winning that he's had at previous stops, like, the ceiling is very high, and he's still really young. Like, I know coaches now, Tony Bennett and Jay Wright, they're ending their coaching careers a little probably earlier than they would have maybe if the transfer portal and NIL wasn't a thing. But like, Ben McCollum it's not difficult to see this being like a potential long-term, like, really good hire for Iowa, as someone that could stick around for a while. This isn't like a rental per se, at least on paper. But no, I think that there's a lot of things that, are just positive in terms of what Ben McCollum brings to the table. Oh, and the other thing, I was mentioning the names. So we were going through the names that we had mentioned. The other one that comes to mind is Chris Collins, because he's a guy at Northwestern who Northwestern doesn't have the most resources, but he just consistently shows up as like out coaches guys on this. Like, you can just tell the way that Northwestern plays. And that's what Ben McCollum reminds me a little bit of, is that he's probably not going to have the most talented teams. He's not going to have the biggest payroll, but they're just going to find ways to win. That's what Ben McCollum did at Drake. And that's it wouldn't be difficult to see him doing the same at Iowa.
Yeah, stylistically, we talked about it a little bit, and we were talking about the top two candidates here. I mean, Drake played the slowest pace in the country, but obviously the more you dig into that, the more you realize that was just a coaching decision. It's kind of like how Kirk Ferentz, to not always to his credit, but plays a style that keeps it competitive, that you can beat every once in a while you can take down the Ohio States of the world with perceived lesser talent. And that seems to be the case, because his Northwest Missouri State teams did score a lot. I mean, and they're actually pretty efficient offensively, typically. So it'll be interesting to see stylistically what he decides to do. I would tend to, I guess we're going to have to see what the roster shapes up as. But you did see the other day against Texas Tech, like when Drake had to move faster because Texas Tech controlled the pace, it was not, it did not cater to how Drake plays basketball. But when Drake controlled the pace against Missouri, it did. I mean, that was how they won the game. That was completely how they won the game. So it'll be interesting to see, how that's a long time away. But I feel like he's going to be nimble, Tyler, based on the research we've done on him. I don't think it's a done deal that he's going to play, Virginia style of basketball from day one, and only Virginia style of basketball under Tony Bennett.
Yeah, I think he'll play the style that will give Iowa the best chance to win. And I think that type of flexibility is good. And it is. So Drake is ranked 364th in Division I in adjusted tempo, according to
Ken Palm. 364 teams.
So they obviously played very slow. But so his 2019-2020 team at Northwest Missouri State, 45.7% from three is what they shot, which is, even for like a program like Iowa that's been a really good shooting team, that's just like absurd. He's had multiple teams that have scored over 80 points a game. So it's not like he has consistently had like these teams that are really low scoring. They've had some good scoring teams. And the thing is that, like, let's say I was able to retain Price Sanford, like, Ben McCollum is going to have access to better shooting than he probably did at Drake. So, if it's you would think that there will be some flexibility there in terms of, if Iowa has access and is able to retain some of these good shooters, that's going to open the door for what Ben McCollum is able to do offensively. And you also see, when we talk about just like the coaching and how well they're coached, like, their offense is it's so calculated. It's so, I don't know, just like the movement, you can tell it's like playing, you can see them in real time playing chess, like getting the matchups they want, trying to get the defense in rotation, trying to get two on the ball and making the play out of it, cutting, all of that sorts of stuff. So it's really the offense it's going to look a lot different defensively and offensively than I was been accustomed to under Fran McCaffery, but I don't necessarily think that that's a bad thing.
What was I going to say here? Sorry, I was scrolling through some of your coverage there. Last thing is when's the press conference? We don't know. How much is he
I-
going to get paid? These are the questions.
yeah. I
No,
don't know I don't know what the press conference.
no. Sorry, I was distracted with something else. I just think all in all, it's a positive day. People are excited. I mean, you can see it on social media. Not that that's a full representation, but my text group seems to be pretty happy too. I think the process was not as messy as everyone thinks it was. I think it was pretty smooth, honestly. There was talk yesterday that West Virginia, Minnesota were still in the mix, and with if Xavier, if Iowa hadn't locked him up, I mean, I don't know what Xavier's going to do after Sean Miller, but that would have been a pretty good fit, I feel like, for McCollum too. So credit to Beth Goetz for getting the job done, and Iowa administration. I assume that she's probably going to be paid, or he's going to be paid, equivalent or more than Fran McCaffrey would have been this year. So that would have been in the 3.5 range, 3.5. I'm going to guess it's a little higher than that. We'll see. But I remember what I was going to say now. Sorry. Sometimes on these live shows, you get, like when writing, you get writer's block. It's no problem. Live shows, you go blank, problem. But how about Fran McCaffrey as the next Drake coach?
I saw that got thrown out
that.
there. Yeah, no, that would be interesting. It's just like all the Iowa schools are just kind of trading coaches at this point. But
that would be it's funny because I'm down here in Norman and covering two former Drake coaches, one assistant and player, and Jan Jensen, and obviously Jenny Baranchek, the former Drake women's head coach. So Iowa and Drake are connected in a lot of ways, and feels like a good time to bring on Dargan Southard whenever he's ready. And we'll talk a little bit of women's basketball before we close up. Tyler just closes out immediately. He's done.
No, I kicked him out.
Okay, yeah, you have the power over there, Mr. Producer.
I do.
Let's do 15 minutes maybe on the women here. It's the Hawkeyes get to the round of 32, last team standing in the state of Iowa in the NCAA tournament. Dargan, what are your thoughts on tonight's matchup against the Sooners? I haven't checked the line this morning, but it was Oklahoma was favored by 4.5 as of last night.
Yeah, I think it's still hovering around there. I mean, to me, I always look at the intangibles and what is kind of in the air for both of these teams. And to me, it's really fascinating because you have Oklahoma. Jenny Baranchek is trying to, in theory, get her Oklahoma program, in a way where Iowa is by breaking through and having these big March moments and finally getting to the Sweet 16 for the first time, I believe, since 2010. But the game's going to be at 3 p.m. on a Monday. I mean, we'll find out if I'm right or not, but I still think that's going to make a difference in the crowd. And so, when you put in all the work to get to be a host, you hope that the people show up to make it matter. And, I think Iowa's history with dealing with these types of pressure moments, both this season and throughout the last couple of seasons for those who are back, I think that's going to pay off, multiple times today. And I think, it could be a tight, I expect a tight game down the stretch. We've seen Iowa kind of slowly get up the mountain of trying to pull off one of these close, tight games against upper level teams. And I feel like, as I wrote in my 3 things.
Yeah, you got 3 things. I got 4 thoughts. So yeah,
I think Iowa gets it done today. I think they go to Spokane.
Yeah, I still lean a little bit Oklahoma. Just they look like an impressive team to me, but what I love about this Iowa team is that they can adapt to almost anyone now. That wasn't really the case last year. They could, against South Carolina, they had no answers at height. I mean, they tried Addie O'Grady a little bit in that championship game. It's just they just didn't, she wasn't ready for that moment necessarily. But Reagan Beers is Oklahoma's star. Now they have a lot of size, not like towering size, not like Lauren Betts size, but like consistent size, big guards. bigger forwards. Reagan Beers is 6'4", almost like a Sonano efficiency-wise if she gets the ball down low, so you can't let her get it. So that's going to be tough. They are second in the country in rebounding margin, right behind UCLA. They had an NCAA tournament record 72 rebounds in the first round against Florida Gulf Coast. Now, there's a lot of factors that go into a ton of rebounds. Florida Gulf Coast couldn't make anything. The Gulf Coast team couldn't throw the ball in the ocean, but
Tough break.
yes. But Iowa is now built for that. Ava Hayden's just been continuing to get like better each game, and you know that they've worked on Dargan. This is what I'm curious about. Does Jan Jensen go with Stolke at the 4, Hayden at the 5 a lot tonight? Because that to me is what the Big Ten tournament opened up for the Hawkeyes. That you could comfortably go with that. And sure, yes, shuttle in Addie O'Grady for sure, because she's going to have size to use, foul to use. She's a good defender, a good passer. Ava can get up and down the court really well. She's a better defender than I think, now that she's grown late in her freshman year. And that also might allow Stolke to, be in a better position against Van, who's their other tough scorer inside. So there's a lot to like about the potential of that. And then maybe move a Folter to the 3 and, kind of go a McCabe, a Folter, Feuerbach 2-3 rotation. And I think you play Lucy like 40 minutes as long as she doesn't get in foul trouble.
Yeah, and I mean, we saw last game, I don't think Iowa can afford the early interior foul trouble that it endured against Murray State, But I think, I think the progression of this post unit is going to be kind of on center stage today because, Reagan Beers does have the ability to dictate the game and take over the game, and she's certainly done that many times this year. So it does kind of feel like, a culmination of this Ava Hayden late season rise, and how does that translate into this post dominant matchup? It's and I like what you said, because I do think the biggest thing that Iowa has developed is winning versatility over the course of this, last 6 weeks. As far as they can win games in the 60s, some of their, pretty much all of their best showings this year haven't been super great offensive performances. So they're certainly comfortable with that type of game. Obviously they're still, their program identity is going to be putting up points. So that's obviously in play as well. But I think everything that, has happened this year and has been a part of this season, which to me is exactly in the spot that you wanted it to be in, realistically forecasting how this year could go back in August and September when, everything of the offseason kind of got settled down and you could say, okay, what exactly is this team going to be? At least to me, Caitlin obviously unlocked best case scenario as a more than a long shot possibility, but reasonably speaking, it felt like, okay, they're going to be a mid seed and give a host on its home floor everything that they have, just the way that they've had to deal with that the last 3 years. So a lot of things in play, and I guess we got a few more hours to kill here until we head over to the Lloyd Noble Center.
Yeah, I do like the 3:00 start for the reasons you outlined.
Very
I
nice.
don't think, I think it's just going to be like a normal Big Ten road game, I think, for Iowa, which is not completely daunting, obviously. And then there was a decent amount of, I would say 1,500 maybe Hawkeye fans in the opener, and I wouldn't be surprised if all of them stayed, and I wouldn't be surprised if some more pop in today. I'm looking out the window to the parking lot here. I'm seeing people walk around with Hawkeye blazers on. So I do think there's going to be a Hawkeye presence there. It's going to be a road feel, but it's not going to be a daunting, it's not like you had to go to Storrs, Connecticut, and you're going to try to pull off the impossible here. It's a winnable game. Iowa is playing its best basketball. There's no question about that. It has all year long, and it's playing with a lot of confidence. And as I wrote, it's playing with no pressure, really. Now, they put pressure on themselves to perform well, yeah. Sydney Folter and Lucy also know this could be their last game, Addie O'Grady too. But, Folter and Olsen have really talked about that urgency that they've felt. But I think as I wrote in my forethoughts, I think the pressure's on the other foot today because Oklahoma has reached the round of 32 under Bronchek each of the last 3 years as a 4 seed, a 5 seed, and a 5 seed. They've gotten to the round of 32 each time, lost every time. So, and we in the press conference yesterday. Now Oklahoma isn't the media pressure cooker, so to speak, in women's basketball that maybe Iowa can be at times. But two of the first three questions yesterday, Dargan, were what is it going to take to get over the hump in this round? What is it going to, there is some pressure there. And we know from covering these last 3 years, Creighton, Georgia, Colorado, I'm sorry, Creighton, Georgia, West Virginia. None of those games were easy. One was a loss at Carver Hawkeye. This is not, Oklahoma's going to be in that tense pressure environment, I feel like. And I think that plays to Iowa's advantage, at least gives them a shot.
Well, in all three of those games, there was a distinct point in the last maybe 2-3 minutes where it's like, oh man, this season is on the line right now. And if Iowa can get Oklahoma to that point, I think Iowa will be the stronger, will be the mentally more experienced team with those kinds of moments. And so I think that's what you hope for if you're Iowa, is putting Oklahoma in an uncomfortable situation on their home floor, which we've seen that become more of a reality in the women's game over the last few years. You've seen 1s and 2s fall on their home floor. So it doesn't feel like, a 6 winning at a 3 is as, absurd as it was maybe even 5 years ago. So I think Iowa has a great opportunity. And, for all that is already been accomplished with this season, and there's been a lot, I think if they lose today, you still feel really good about year one, but it's definitely clear that, if you can say, hey, we followed up Caitlin Clark with a Sweet 16, go to Spokane, give probably UConn, a Hail Mary shot. I think that you could see that pay off down the road. And the same way that, I think Caitlin Clark doesn't come to Iowa if that Megan Gustafson team doesn't get to the Elite Eight and kind of reestablish that brand. You could see, a Sweet 16 after Caitlin paying off down the road with other big moments coming up. So I think it's, again, it's not as big as the pressure dealt with last year, but still a significant moment that Iowa can take advantage of today.
And I think if it does lay out into that scenario, Dargan, and the Georgia game, Caitlin had to make a big shot in the final minute to kind of pull that away. Last year against West Virginia, everyone remembers the Sydney Falter drive with 2 minutes to go in a 52-52 game that kind of gave Iowa the exhale that it needed down the stretch. But if they can get to that point, let's say it's tied with 2 minutes to go, Dargan, that's the story of the season right now for Iowa, the shortcoming of the season, the biggest thing. They haven't won these close games, haven't won a game decided by a 3-year loss yet this year, lost a couple in overtime. They've blown a few games late. So that's kind of the next step, I feel like, for this team. And what a story that would be to write if they could. That would be the best case scenario is you come in here, and win a close game, win something at the wire and prove that you can do it. And then knowing that going into the UConn game, which was the last time they won a close game. They did do the things down the stretch they needed to, barely. They kind of touched a few things in that last minute, but
that one was ugly, but it counted.
So I think that would be the best, other than a blowout road win here, which is pretty unlikely, would be the best case scenario. And I agree with you. If you could get to Spokane, that's the most realistic ceiling I think you could have expected for this team.
Absolutely.
And then you just get that experience. All these freshmen, Ava Hayden, Taylor Stremlow, Aaliyah Guyton. Unfortunately, not Tegan Mullaney, who's not here. Maybe she can come back next week if Iowa advances. But she hasn't been in the rotation anyway. But you get that Sweet 16 experience. You get a taste for, hey, here's where the bar is. Here's where we got to get starting next year.
Well, and, we talk about setting stuff up to happen in the tournament. And again, this is not exactly what happened, but it does kind of illustrate going through those tough, close losses, what it can mean. You look at the Maryland men's team yesterday. They had, I believe, their last 3 losses of the season going into the tournament were on buzzer beaters. One was the half court shot from Michigan State. One was the full court drive in the Big Ten tournament. And I think they lost at Northwestern too. And what happens yesterday? The basketball gods throw in their way and they win on a buzzer beater to keep their season alive. And so, as big as winning that UCLA game would have been, or either of the Ohio State games would have been, I think winning this one in a close game is more significant than all three of those would have been. And so, again, it's a pretty, you can see a path where Iowa takes advantage of everything that it's gone through this year. And, Iowa, to its credit, has had a lot of these moments over the years, and they've delivered in most of them. So pretty interesting to see how this one plays out today.
Yeah, a lot of love in the YouTube comments for Ava Hayden. I'm really curious to see what she can do. This will be definitely her biggest post matchup yet. Although she fared pretty well against Michigan State. I liked Jan Jensen's analogy for her the other day. How she's a kind of like a baby deer. Finally kind of getting to flourish. In the wild. And man, it's fun to watch. And I think you just got to give Jan a lot of credit. I know people are whining about why isn't Ava playing more, but she's playing with so much confidence right now on the biggest stage, and I think that's what you want. You want somebody playing with a lot of confidence right now. Not a lot of pressure either. She's coming off the bench. She is, other than Lucy, I think she's got to stay. Well, she's obviously got to stay out of foul trouble. And other than Lucy, I think Ava's probably the biggest key to this game. Stolke to an extent because she's got to be able to rebound. And she's got the more jumping ability. One stat of note is Reagan Beers only plays 22 minutes a game. So, Oklahoma runs, so that's not like they don't want to run, but it's not like Beers is going to be in there 40 minutes. So Iowa is going to have to, Oklahoma comes at you in waves, but Iowa's going to have to take advantage when she's out.
Yeah, and it does feel fitting that, probably the biggest late season storyline over the last couple of weeks has been Ava Hayden, and here Iowa is with a very distinct post matchup that kind of is the realistic final test of her season ascension. And so you had to, for everybody who wanted a different route for her freshman season, you had to give Jan Jensen and her post history the benefit of the doubt that she was probably bringing her along at the speed that she needed to. And, I think while it was fair not too long ago to say, hey, Ava's freshman season, it's just going to be, minimal playing time, but there's still a lot of promise for the rest of her career. Now it's like, this freshman season can really ignite a productive career moving forward if you can, have the biggest moments of your freshman career be in the postseason. That's got to be a huge confidence lift for this year and, the years to come. So that feels most intriguing. Although I do think that Jan probably doesn't want to have to put her in the game 2 minutes into the game as she did on Saturday. But she will probably be in early, I would think.
Yeah, and that was the other thing about the first round win is Iowa got to save its leg. The Fulcher played the most of anyone, which was 27 minutes. Oklahoma actually, they won 81-58 over Florida Gulf Coast, but it wasn't as routine as maybe the final score sounded. That game was still pretty tight late. So and they kind of had those first round jitters. But last point, Dargan, and then we'll let the viewers go. First of all, shout out to you viewers. I've been watching the audience, and it has not dropped off since.
Yeah, there's about 500 people on here right now.
Yeah, it has not dropped off since we stopped the men's basketball conversation. It just shows the passion you guys all have for women, the women's team, and we love it. That's why we're down here. We know you guys want the coverage, and we're here for you for that, and we're going to have a ton of it post-game. Starts at 3 o'clock today. But here's my last point, Dargan, and then we'll let everyone go. Sean Sullivan is, I talked to him yesterday. He has the Oklahoma scout. He is a first-year assistant. Randy Henderson had the Murray State scout. Two great hires for Jan Jensen. I think you would say it's turned out really well on that front. Sean comes up from North Carolina. He was with North Carolina last year. And guess what? North Carolina beat Jenny Baranczyk in Oklahoma 61-52 last year. Held Oklahoma to 52 points. And I've had a lot of people ask me, why is Iowa's defense so much better this year? He's been a big part of that. He has brought what he calls his Carolina principles to Iowa and how it plays defense. And I feel like He probably doesn't get much at all credit. And Raina Harmon is also kind of their co-defensive coordinator. So those two have really uh, generated more defensive intensity, I think, and I don't know, like what you guys have all wanted from the men's team, right? Like, hey, let's play some defense. And this team really has. And here's, I'm going to read Sean's quote. It's in our subscriber story, so I'm giving a little bit away here, but that's okay. He says there's three keys to the game. Their transition defense, they're the number one team in pace of play. We've got to limit that. Second thing is points in the paint. They're going to try to hammer it into Beers and hammer it into Skylar Van. The third thing is rebounding. Because of those second chance opportunities, they're either getting putbacks or kicking it out for an open three. If we do those three things, it's going to be a good ball game. So it's about boxing out and getting back on defense. Two things Iowa's been pretty good at this year.
Yeah, and I think that was, if you look at the trajectory of the defensive importance of this season, I mean, not to say that the early part of the season didn't go a productive way, but with Iowa's offense kind of being inconsistent a little bit out of the gates, it kind of made them be, even more a defensive oriented team. And, slowly over the course of the season, Fulter warmed up, Olsen warmed up, and everybody, got the offense to a more traditional place in the Iowa program. But I think, Jane Jensen identified that early in the offseason as, hey, if there's any area that we can make a leap from last year, despite all we lost, it's on the defensive end. And, the way that the staff was kind of restructured a little bit with Jan moving up, I think was very successful and a huge reason why it is the way that it is. And you get here to the NCAA tournament and you feel, more confident in Iowa's defense than you have at any point recently. And you feel like this team could win a 65-63 game and it not be, what happened in that game. I mean, if, the UCLA game was low scoring, Ohio State. So like, I feel like getting to, knowing that it wasn't going to be as streamlined as it was the last few years with the offensive product obviously being the top priority. I think Iowa has done as well a job as it could getting to this point with an identity and a productive set of ways to win the game, and defensively is certainly one of them.
Yep, a successful season for sure. Today would be gravy for year one of the Jan Jensen era. Dargan Souther, great job. I will point one last thing out. When Iowa lost to UCLA, lost by 2, they were out-rebounded 25-11 in the second half. Iowa had a really good first half rebounding, not so much in the second. Ava Hayden didn't play in that game. Ava Hayden did not play. And so that's a big difference, and that's something that we're going to watch today. As Iowa faces Oklahoma, 3 p.m. ESPN. You guys tune in. Dargan and I will have full post-game coverage late into the night, I'm sure, and then fly back to Iowa City probably for an introductory press conference. So anyway, thanks, Dargan. Thank you, viewers, also. See you, buddy. See you in like an hour.
Right on.